Good morning, everyone. It's Brenda Quintana here, live from the Beehive this morning. I'm so glad to be back in Boston. I was away last week. We were up in Ontario looking at universities for our son. He's graduating next year in 2019. So we did like the college tour up there. And actually, if you're not a Canadian, and I'm sure some of you are from the US, since that's where I live, it's a lot different in Canada. We're a little bit, or Canadians kind of do things a little differently when they're looking for colleges, at least from the experience that we had up there. We went on tours with a lot of seniors or kids that were already in 12th grade and already had acceptances, and they were touring the schools that they had applied to. They do it in reverse order. They get acceptances first and then they go see the schools and try and decide after the fact. Maybe it's because we have less schools up in Canada. So it was kind of an interesting experience because for Canadians, we're like way early, and for the American system, we're kind of like maybe not late, but you know, I know of kids that toured colleges when they were in the sophomore year, and so it's really interesting the way the two systems work. And acceptances for Canadian universities are, the deadline is later, and the acceptances or the letters that go out are also later. So it's going to be interesting seeing how that all plays out. And so it was kind of cool to get up there and see the schools. Now, of course, I am a Canadian originally, and I still am a Canadian living in the US. And it was interesting just to see the whole process and to see schools that I had gone to as well. I went to two universities in Canada, Waterloo and Western, and one for my bachelor's and one for my master's degree. And so it was neat to see the schools again and think, oh, would I go back here if I was like 20 years old again? And yeah, I think I made the right decisions. So that's kind of cool, and I'm hoping my son will figure it all out. It's hard to kind of sit back and just watch him work, and you know, it's hard too, because it probably means he'll be going off to school in 2019. But let's not think about that yet. That's when we'll do stamp therapy next year. You'll see me stamping a lot more probably, because I'll be like, oh, I need to stamp to stay sane. So anyway, yeah, this morning we woke up, there was up in Toronto today, there was a man who drove into pedestrians on Yonge Street in Toronto, and that's horrific and awful. And I looked it up in the news this morning, and I feel terrible for anyone that's involved. We don't know very much yet about the victims, and I don't want to dwell on that right now because this is not what a stamping video is for. But yes, it's always awful when things like that happen. And but in life, if you choose only to focus on the bad things, you're going to be a very sad and miserable person. And so it's not like I want to ignore all of that, but I know personally, if I sat down and listened to all the news every day, I would and I've been there and I've done that, and I've been like very unhappy because there's always awful stuff happening. So this is what I do. I don't tend to dwell on the news. Like, I'll look it up, understand what's going on, and then I'll like put it away. And I want to do good in my realm, what I can do, what I can control, and there's some things that are out of my control. So I try and focus on things that make me healthy and happy, and one of them is creativity and stamping. So that's what I try and do. I try and focus on that, and I try and keep my family healthy and safe, but some things are out of my hand, and I can't can't dwell on them. I can't deal with all the problems of the world. So I'll deal with what I can locally and what I have influence over and what I can do personally. And I know that creativity is a great escape for a lot of us. So that's probably why you won't see me dwelling on like news stories on my videos or on my blog posts and stuff like that. So with that being said, let's talk about Casing Tuesday. Today's the day when we take a card out of one of the current catalogs and we give it a makeover. And so today's card was actually pretty hard for me. So I'm going to flip around the camera and I'm going to tell you why it was hard for me. So Karen asked me, just looking up, if I only have one son. Yes, I have one child and he's a boy and he's 17 and yeah, we're very fortunate to have him. We were only able to have one, so I love him to pieces. Very hard. I'm sure if any of you have parented teenagers before, it's a very hard thing. I would do it over again in a heartbeat. He's an awesome kid, but it's like, you know, you have your heart, you know, you're your kid, and then you have to let him go out in the world, and that's a hard process. And I'm usually not one that gets teary-eyed, but I think probably this year with the whole process of, you know, him potentially going away next year, I probably will be a little teary-eyed for once. So anyway, let me not be teary-eyed this morning because that's just bad. Let me flip this around and let me focus on creativity and stamping and happiness. Let's see. Okay. Sunny skies today here in Boston. Blue skies, sunny. It's beautiful. Did I tell you? I should have told you how crappy it was in Toronto last week. Oh my gosh. We had an ice storm, we had rain, we had snow. It was like, oh. And I'm sure some of you had that same kind of crappy weather last week, but it was a little bit more severe up in Canada. Our plane like barely landed. There were a lot of cancellations and we had to circle for a bit before we could land. But you know, none of our tours were canceled. So that's the main thing. We got to see the schools, even though it wasn't maybe in optimal conditions. But I think that one of the things is that we got to see the schools probably what Canadian winter weather is kind of like, a little bit not so good. So actually it was a good thing. It was very realistic. All right. Okay. So here's the card that we are casing today. It's this card on this Pear Pizzazz card base. And, you know, for a beginner, this might not be the best card to start off with casing because it's like, yes, casing is good because it gets us out of our comfort zone, but I would label this a more difficult card. The reason why this is a more difficult card, if you don't have a die cut that will go across here, like a word, then you're kind of stuck because this is kind of what ties it together. Actually, this is the focal point of the card, the congrats. So it could make this card potentially a little harder for people to make. So if this were my first week, I'd probably say go look at some of the other cards that we've done. I'm trying to remember what last week's card was. I think last week's card would have been easier for you. So it is kind of a complicated card. So I kind of did it my way. I simplified it a little bit. I didn't do a word focal point because I thought, let me try and do something that other people would maybe realistically have in their collection. So I just used a tone-on-tone paper, one color paper with white. So, and then I used the same color in the background, and then I have my little bird is the focal point. So I kind of changed up the focal point, and then I just kind of added elements that were in the card, like there was a little bit of leafy stuff going on. I kept it tone-on-tone, very subtle. And then my greeting is down here. So I think I represented the feel of the card, but I did it like in a more simplistic fashion. So what I thought we would do today, since this card, you know, is done and stuff, I thought, let me show you how I would do this card with another color paper in that same pack. The Fresh Florals Designer Series paper pack is an awesome pack because it's all, it's in colors, but it's the in color and white. So it's a very easy pack to work with. And I want to show you how you could take any paper in that pack and turn it into this card. So first, let me talk about the Petal Palette stamp set a little bit. It's a bundle right now. It's in the Occasions catalog, and it's a big bundle. It comes with one stamp set, but the stamp set is pretty big, so it comes in 2 cases. And then it comes with framelits, and it has lots of cool little pieces that don't necessarily match the stamp sets, but it has some framelits that will cut out like the rose here and the bird here. So it gives you a great many pieces to work with. Right now, if you buy the stamp set and the thinlits together, you save 10%. These products will carry over into the annual catalog, but they are going to be individual products, and you won't be able to save the 10% as a bundle. So if you're interested in this particular bundle, it might be a good idea to get it now so that you can save the 10%. Let me pop those aside. And okay, so let's figure out what we're going to stamp first. We do need to do some stamping first. So I need a piece of Whisper White. I'm using a thick Whisper White. I think you could also use the regular Whisper White. I don't think there's any reason why that would be an issue. I just have I have a little bin. I'll show it to you. This is my Scrap Whisper White and Very Vanilla bin. And any little tiddly bits that I have that are left over from cutting bigger pieces get stuck in this bin, and I keep this right here on my stamping area. So whenever I need a small little scrap piece of Whisper White or Very Vanilla, I can just go in here because there's always like little pieces in here. I don't keep things that are smaller than an inch. Haha, this one should not be in here. So usually it's like an inch and over because I don't want really, really tiny pieces that aren't going to help me with anything. But usually they're like an inch, inch and a half, and they're just little pieces. So that's what I keep on my desk. It's just handy to have because that's something that I'm always cutting down to size. So I want a nice little bin that I can throw things into. I'm going to use the Berry Burst paper, so I'm going to use the Berry Burst ink pad. Let me open it up. And aren't you excited that we're going to have new ink pads? I'm excited. This one is an old style ink pad, but pretty soon, in June, maybe even sooner, I'll start stamping with the new ink pads. We'll see. I kind of let that go kind of late because I don't like to show you things you can't buy yet or have yet. So I'm just going to stamp this on the end. We're going to die cut this. Forgot to say, this is my thank you stamp. And then that's the only thing we need to stamp in Berry Burst. But we do need to stamp the little bird. And for that, I'm going to use Memento ink in black. Here's my little chickadee. I love this stamp because it's just easy and it looks exactly like a chickadee. And I'm just going to stamp that down. We have a die for this and a die for that. That's why I'm stamping them first. Now, let me grab my Big Shot. I've got my magnetic platform on here. A lot of you know I like to use my magnetic platform almost exclusively for cutting the dies. It helps them stay in place a little bit when you're cutting. You don't need it when you're starting out because your Big Shot will come with a regular platform, but it's great if down the road it's like a little thing that you can add on that will make your life a little easier. So let's do the chickadee. And where did my fingers go? Here they are. So we'll need this little guy right here. And I'm going to just cut these one at a time. Well, let me do this. I'm going to cut this bird out, and I'm also going to cut this piece out. Let's do that. And I'll cut the thank you out separately, but that way we're kind of doing two at a time. You know what? I don't like the way that's centered. All right, stop the presses. Okay. Sometimes when I'm about to run it through, I kind of just put a little pressure on here so that nothing shifts before it gets through the machine. All right, so we've got the little bird. I'll set him aside, and then we've got this, and this is going to create all sorts of little little chads. Usually I can, if you have an end of a hard table, I'd usually just tap this and that will take the little chads out. Now this, right here, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick this over top of my garbage. I just use my finger and I go like this, but I'm just going to do this over top of my garbage because I don't want them everywhere. All right, I got most of the pieces out just by flicking. There's a couple more. This piece actually comes out really fairly quickly. And then, now I still have these little chads. Oh, I'm gonna have to vacuum later. Okay, so now, get rid of this bird. And now we need to cut out, we're gonna need a piece of whisper weight for this big branchy piece. And then we're also going to cut out using this little label. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the thank you through twice. So I'm going to center this such that, I'm fighting with my magnet. Let me stick this down for a second. I'm going to center this so that, or not center it, cut it so that the thank you's towards the left side, and then I'm going to run it through a second time. Let me just do this one first. Run it through. All right. So let me pull this out, and here's my big branchy piece. Okay, I'm going to cut that apart in a second. And then I've got this piece right here. Take this out. So I want this to be a little shorter because my thank you doesn't stretch all the way across. So all I have to do is just line this back up on the length and then just kind of move it to wherever you want the cut to be on the right side. Is that off the camera? See how I did that? I'm cutting, now I'm going to cut the right side, the left side's already cut. And then I am just going to run that through. And that will give me a shorter little label. So you can kind of customize it to make it a little shorter if you've got shorter words. So it looks a little better. So I like that little tip. If you have one of those, you can do that with almost any shape. Make things a little shorter. All right, so now we've got all the pieces, the die cut pieces. So we've got this piece, thank you, and the little bird. Let me just have a look. So some of the pieces did not come out of my leaf set. So you can either take your fingernail and just, you know, just pop them out. There's not too many on here. Sometimes I take my paper piercing tool or sometimes I take my die brush. But when there's so few, it just like takes a second to do that, and the die brush would probably take longer just to, because you have to get it out of the drawer. So those are all ready. You're going to need a card base. So I cut a piece of cardstock to 8.5 by 5.5 and then scored it in half at the 4 1/4 inch mark, and then I just fold it. So that will be my card base. You're also going to need 2 pieces of 1 cardstock and 1 paper. I'm using the Fresh Florals Designer Series paper. It's retiring, and it's cut to 4 inches by 2 1/4 inches. And this is the matching Berry Burst cardstock, also cut to 4 inches by 2 1/4 inches. So let me think. Do I have everything I need assembly-wise? Yeah, I think we can go ahead and start assembling. Okay, yesterday when I was making this card, I did this piece first. So you're going to want to cut it up into 2 pieces. So let me think, where did I cut it? Ah, right here. So there's about halfway through this piece, there's this leaf right here. And I'm just going to come and I'm going to cut this away. So now we've got 2 separate pieces to put behind here, and that way you don't have to do die cutting twice. So I'll take some Tombow and hopefully I can get it started. Yep. And I'm just going to put it on like a few spots on the back of this piece. I want this to tuck behind my card. So I'm going to lay it out so that the leaves are kind of sticking out down here near the corner. Okay, right now this looks kind of weird because you've got this branch thing sticking up here, but the main thing is you want this bottom part stuck down because there's going to be cardstock over top of here. Then you're going to do the same thing with this other little piece, and just want to make sure, look where the glue is so I don't stick my fingers in it. So then I'm just going to put this out here, maybe like this. Okay, so now I've got those little pieces that will stick out. That looks kind of funny right now, doesn't it? But I've already know my layout for my cards, so I know it's not going to look funny in the long run. So I'm just going to put a little bit of Tombow right at the top corner of this card, and I'm going to overlap it probably about, you know, maybe 3/8 of an inch of this cardstock is going to show on the top side and the bottom side. So then I can take this looks crooked, okay, see, and then I can just kind of put it on there like that. Let me put Tombow on. It's easier if you attach the designer series paper to the cardstock first, because then when you're getting it on there you can see exactly where you're putting it down. You'll have both pieces already situated. I'm kind of centering it, so I'm looking here and here, making sure there's equal distance, and then kind of from side to side equal distance. Okay, and then I'm going to take this piece. This piece doesn't have a lot of spots to put glue, so I'm just going to put dots of glue right down the center, and that should give it enough hold. And then I'm just going to put this right across the bottom. This is kind of just a busy piece for the bird to perch on, but it's like, the card itself is a very busy card. It's got a lot going on. So I don't mind having this whisper white piece coming across. It's not super distracting because there's only 2 colors on the card. I want the focus to be on the greeting and the bird, and this is just like a nice little extra piece that kind of blends in. So then I'm going to take my little thank you and put Tombow all over it. And just situate it a little bit. I want it to touch on this piece, and I also want it to kind of come off the bottom a little bit, you know, kind of anchoring this bottom corner, but that way you can see the little shape kind of coming off the side a little bit, whereas if you were to keep it all on top of the designer series paper, you wouldn't really see it very well. And then for the bird, I'm going to just grab the little chickadee. I'm going to grab some dimensionals, and I'll just pop 2 dimensionals on here, and then remove them, the backing at least. Okay, I have no fingernails right now. I have no fingernails because my son was trying to teach me how to throw a frisbee. He's on the ultimate frisbee team. And anyway, I had made the mistake of going out there with, my nails aren't super long to begin with, but I was catching the Frisbee, and he taught me how to catch it the right way, but it I cracked one of my nails. If you play Ultimate Frisbee on a team, you really, really, really need to have short nails, because the velocity of those things, it may look like, you know, fun throwing Frisbee. I mean, that's serious stuff when they're out there. So yeah, he threw me a hard one, and I caught it, but it hit the edge of my fingernail. And so, yeah. Anyway, so I have no fingernails right now because I have to cut that right off. That's just an aside. So little chickadee. And then I'm just going to kind of have him perch just a little bit onto my little, I'm looking at it like a lattice or a trellis piece, just right there, close enough to the thank you, so it kind of ties it in as a little grouping down there. So there's the card, and like, look, it looks good in powder pink, and it looks good in berry burst, and I'm sure it will look good in fresh fig and tranquil tide and lemon lime twist too. So if you wanted to do a whole set of these as like a thank you card set, I think it would look quite good, like to have, you know, a nice little set going with all the different colors and be a little thank you card set. So how cool is that? And you know, that wasn't very hard to make at all. So I like that it's simple, but actually it looks complex because you've got the dies, cuts kind of sitting out there. So it looks like a hard card, but it's really actually quite simple. Well, I mean, you guys will all know that it's not a hard card when you look at it, but someone getting it as a gift, maybe they're not a stamper, they're not going to think it's hard. Okay, I'm going to just look back and see comments before I sit down and turn this around. Oh, Maryland has clouds. Well, that sucks. I hope you get sunshine soon. Oh, let me go. All right. And someone said, like, doing things with your hands is a very good therapy. You know, I agree. This is like really good therapy for us to be creative. And some people need to do creativity in a different way, but for a lot of us, stamping fits the bill. Okay. Oh, Janine said she's glad that she wasn't the only one that struggled with this card. It was a hard card, but this is the thing, you know, don't shy away from those hard cards, because usually the hard cards I learn the most about, you know, stamping. Okay. All right. Let me flip you guys around. So yeah, let's talk about, you know, cards and the casing card, and when something is not quite to your liking. Like, I have my comfort zone cards. They are usually cards that have like a very defined focal point, you know, clear images. That is what I know how to do really well. So when I get a card like this that's really busy, it's hard for me, and it takes me longer to create the cards. Actually, funny you should mention that, Janine, because I think I started off doing this card with, this was my third stamp set that I chose to do with a card. I started off with another one that I thought I could use, and it just didn't look quite right. I think this one's hard because the focal point is not a traditional focal point. So yeah, I finally settled on this one because it kind of had the elements that I needed. And one of my other criteria when I'm designing for this group, not that you have to use this criteria, is I don't want to use 10 stamp sets on one card, because I'm putting this on my blog and I want everyone to be able to do this. Now, not everyone can afford 10 stamp sets all at once. So I try and choose like one bundle or a stamp set, like maybe 2 stamp sets, 3 at the most. But I try and choose things, you know, that like are cohesive, so that you don't need to, you know, go out and get a bunch of stuff. I'm trying to imitate like what like you as a customer or would have, you know, in the house, like, or you could buy this bundle and make this card. Like, yes, you'll need some ink pads and you'll need the Big Shot, but once you have those basic tools, then you won't need to buy 10 stamp sets, 5 stamp sets to create my cards. I want to kind of keep it so that there's like a core group of products so that you don't need to do that. So I love how this card came out. I was able to use just one bundle on it. And I think the nice thing is, like, this particular card is duplicatable with other paper. Like, you could make this same card that I made. If you didn't have fresh florals paper, you could do a different type of paper. So I like that as well. Also gets me out of my comfort zone. I should not always be in my comfort zone, nor should you. If you're a beginner though, yeah, try and stay within your comfort zone so you don't get frustrated. But then once you start to understand the process, get out of your comfort zone. Try a different card, copy a different card, because it's good for us. I'm just reading what Janine says. I'm trying to learn to assess a casing card and pull out what elements and move from there. Yeah, like, so you can pull out like the certain elements of the card and, you know, decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And that's a great strategy, you know, like what are the core elements? And sometimes the card will take you in a completely different direction and you might not look exactly like the original card, but that's okay too. Like, on this group, we're not there to judge, oh, did she get it? Did she closely case the card, but made it different? You know, it's about like the whole creativity process, and maybe about having a starting point, like having a sample to start with. So I'm okay if your card doesn't end up looking quite like the original. It's part of the process. So, but I like your idea of like starting with some elements and trying to figure out what those might be and see if you can plug them into the card. A lot of the times you can do that. All right, well, here is my challenge for you this week. Get out there and case a card. And if you're feeling up to it, post it on our Casing Tuesday Facebook group. The link is down below in the description. If you like any of the products that you saw me use, you want to know what they're about, where to get them, you can click on another link in the description, which is a link to my blog post. And down at the bottom of the blog post, it will have the dimensions of the layers that I talked about on this card and all the supplies that I use for this card. So my challenge to you is to go out and case a card. If it's not this one, if this one's too difficult for you, go back and look at some of the other cards that we've cased. And the benefit of doing that is you'll see the samples that other people have done, and maybe that will help you with your process as well. That I know always helps me if I see in a challenge, if I see a couple of samples already and they're like, oh yeah, I can see how people translated this, and case a card and do something that is creative and makes you happy. Remember, there are things that are in your control and there's things out of your control. And, you know, sometimes we have to deal with a lot of sadness, and on a personal basis, you have to do that. And then there's always crap happening in the world, and try not to focus too much on that. Try and focus on what you can influence in your sphere. Try and focus on being happy yourself, your creativity. Some people might look at this as a frivolous endeavor. I don't think so, especially paper crafting, because it's such a giving, wonderful hobby. You know, not only are you being creative, but you can take that card and mail it to someone and give them a little happiness in their life. So take that card that you make and send it to someone. That would be a really good idea. So on that note, I hope you guys all have a great week, and I will be back here again next week. And I hope everyone has some sunshine this week. Probably not everyone will have sunshine at once, but at least sometime this week, I hope the sun pokes out in your neighborhood. All right, guys, have a great week. Bye-bye.